What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We're getting into the middleweight 160-pound division, which has had kind of a slow churn of top fighters in recent years. Basically, you had a Gennady Golovkin era from 2013 to 2017, just after Sergio Martinez and Miguel Cotto were holding middleweight belts. Triple G really was the king of the middleweights for over a half decade. Then he finally had the two mega fights with Canelo, resulting in a draw and then a Canelo decision win, both controversial. But these shifted the energy and the power in that division over to Canelo, who's been non-committal to any division since then. Canelo's basically been fighting across 3 divisions, although he's now saying that he wants his 2021 plans to involve unifying the titles at 168. So he appears less interested in a third Triple G fight, at least at middleweight, which I understand. There are a lot of exciting challenges that await him at 168, and he's definitely on a mission to make history. I mean, look at his track record. Now, since the WBC and the WBA both are in the business of issuing like 2 belts at least, I have to do my best to recognize only one to avoid confusion. Canelo is the WBC's franchise champion, and Jermall Charlo is their regular champion. The WBA's super champion, WBC calls theirs a franchise, WBA calls theirs a super champion. So their super champion is also Canelo. Then their lesser champion is Ryota Morata. It's stupid, I know. But the other 2 champions at middleweight are Triple G, who still holds the IBF belt, and Demetrius Andrade, who currently holds the WBO. By the way, if you trace these belts' histories, you'll see that the WBC and the WBA have richer and deeper legacies. These are often the most credible belts to have. The IBF came a little later, and then the WBO is kind of like the newcomer to the party. You'll often see that their champ is a guy who you might not have heard of as much as the WBC or the WBA champ. There are exceptions. So Canelo's the biggest fish at 160 and has the most belts, but it'll likely be fights between some of these other guys that'll determine the future of the division. Triple G just defeated his IBF mandatory, solid performance, pretty thrilling being able to see Triple G fight with no crowd, just to hear the sound of the blows and just get a more intimate look at some of the things that have made him so deadly and so great through the years. So Triple G just handled business there, although I did see some signs of a drop-off in speed and maybe a little explosion. His defense has generally been his offense, and I don't think his attack is as deadly as it was. I don't know if it's that he's telegraphing his punches, that he's just not putting them together, putting the combinations together with the same snap. Tough to tell. Would Cesar Romero, his last opponent, have made it to the 7th round versus a younger Triple G? Who knows, but I don't think so. But I do think that Triple G has enough in the tank for a couple more great performances. And I just hope that he could get the most out of this final stretch, legacy-wise. I thought it was unfortunate that Triple G was 35 years old by the time he fought Canelo. And when the casual fans finally got a chance to see this Triple G that they'd been hearing so much about. I mean, the fights were great, but they really didn't tell the story of how devastating a force Triple G has been over the past 10 years. Plus, Triple G never really reaped the benefits and the spoils of a deserved win in either of those 2 fights. And he ended up beltless. He went into the first Canelo fight with the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF titles, and lost them all by the end of the 2nd fight. Then he later won the vacant IBF title back versus Derevianchenko in a fight that I actually thought Derevianchenko should have won, but Triple G was awarded. In fact, Triple G versus Derevianchenko was the first and only fight where my eyes told me that Triple G lost. But he came out of it with the IBF belt and is clearly now angling for the biggest and best fights possible. Even his attitude with the press has changed a little less Mr. Nice Guy and seemingly more empowered business-wise. Keyword, seemingly. But Matchroom, that's Eddie Hearn's company, and Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya's company, both on DAZN, they basically have all of the best middleweights not named Jermall Charlo. Jamal Charlo is kind of sitting on a PBC island and is thus far unable to get in the mix with Canelo, Triple G, and Demetrius Andrade. Even Jaime Munguia, a divisional newcomer with some buzz, is off the table for Jermall Charlo. All of these guys are on the zone. Now, Chris Eubank Jr. might be a possibility for Charlo. Look, I know, Charlo, right? Well, Jamal Charlo was looking great at 154 before going to 160, where he was still looking great, but versus lesser middleweight competition. Now, all of that changes with his recent performance versus Derevianchenko. The same Derevianchenko who, like I said, to my eyes, beat Triple G, but in reality, lost the decision in a very competitive fight. Well, Derevianchenko couldn't fight as even a fight versus Jamal Charlo. Now, it was still a very competitive fight, very interesting and a grueling matchup, but Jamal Charlo beat Derevianchenko more convincingly than Triple G or Daniel Jacobs did. And now, Jamal Charlo's basically beaten most of the relevant middleweights under the PBC banner. So he can either wait for Jarrett Hurd or someone from 154, other than his brother Jermall, to come up to 160 to fight, or Al Haymon, PBC, will have to work with someone else in order to make the fights that matter happen. I just hope that Jamal Charlo can secure another good or great opponent for 2021. I really want him to be able to showcase his tremendous skills. He's looking really exciting, and if he ends up getting kind of shut out of the relevant middleweight picture, kind of like Terrence Crawford is at 147, that would just be a damn shame, especially because he's a belt holder. Now, however frustrating that might sound, triple that frustration with Demetrius Andrade's championship reign at middleweight so far. My God, I don't know if I could think of another belt holder who, fight by fight, is fighting nothing but mid-tier contenders that nobody knows about. You know, like, at least Gary Russell Jr. is fighting a Jojo Diaz, for instance, and defending his titles that way. I get that Andrade's fulfilling his WBO obligations and is fighting his mandatories, but man, his legacy could really stand to gain from fighting another elite middleweight. And he's actually on the zone. The problem that I think he's running into is that although he is a belt holder, nobody wants to fight him. He's very difficult to win a round against, let alone beat him. I mean, he's still undefeated. He's now won titles at 154 and 160, and he still doesn't have a name. So it wouldn't be as big a money fight as a fight versus, say, Canelo or Triple G. Demetrius Andrade really might need to take a gamble and overextend himself to get things going. Either taking a slightly unfavorable purse split or something that will at least put him in the ring with someone who could really push him and enhance his legacy. He really appears to be among the best round winners in the sport. He doesn't have the most power, although he can score the knockout, but minute for minute, round for round, he might be the toughest puzzle to solve in the division. We just can't say that with any certainty because he has yet to fight a top 10 middleweight. And he's now 32 years old, so the clock's ticking. Now the good news here is that young Jaime Munguia is the #1 contender for both the WBC and the WBO belts. And it's not likely that he'll be fighting either Canelo, one of the WBC champs, or Jamal Charlo, the other WBC champ, anytime soon. So maybe the fight that makes itself would be Demetrius Andrade versus Jaime Munguia. Now, this would be a great opportunity for Munguia, and it would give Andrade a big name to add to his middleweight resume. But if I was managing Munguia and was paying close attention, I wouldn't want that fight with Andrade, not right now. Munguia's now has serious trouble with slick boxer Dennis Hogan down at 154 and versus Toriano Johnson in his last fight. And Andrade is a very skilled, crafty boxer, bigger and better than Dennis Hogan. And I thought Dennis Hogan deserved a decision win versus Munguia. But maybe we do see Andrade versus Munguia. We might also get Demetrius Andrade versus the British Liam Williams, who's kind of been building a name regionally and has been on a nice run versus some moderate competition over the past few years. But there's also the possibility that Demetrius Andrade leaves 160 to take on an opportunity at 168. He's already expressed interest. He's kind of Canelo chasing like everybody else, although Andrade still has yet to compete there. Now, I prefer for Andrade to stay at 160 and find a good opportunity there. I like to see him fight Triple G with both the IBF and the WBO titles up for grabs. That might be a good legacy cementing fight for Triple G too, if he can't get the third fight with Canelo. It would actually probably be Triple G's best win, aside from maybe Daniel Jacobs. But if Andrade versus Triple G or Andrade versus Munguia doesn't happen, then he might need to jump to 168, where Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, Daniel Jacobs, and David Lemieux all fight on DAZN. I think that as it stands, you've got to consider Triple G, Jermall Charlo, and Andrade the 3 best non-Canelo middleweights. I honestly don't know who I'd favor between Triple G and Charlo, but I think I'm beginning to lean Charlo. That performance versus Derevianchenko was very impressive, and I think that his 12-round cardio appears to be at least on par with Triple G, maybe even better, and I think he probably now is more elusive than Triple G defensively. I'd actually love to see that fight, but I think that it's unlikely. Middleweight is just one of the divisions where the PBC exclusivity kind of seems to hurt the PBC fighter in potential matchups and legacy building. I hope that they could cross the street and provide a great fight for who I feel is potentially one of the best all-around fighters in boxing in Jamal Charlo. Again, I think that Canelo is done at 160. Other middleweights worth mentioning are Ryota Morata. Say that a few times fast. But he avenged his last loss versus Rob Brandt with a second-round knockout in their rematch. And he hasn't fought since December of 2019. But he's looked pretty deadly in his last few fights. Unfortunately, Morata's at top-ranked ESPN, where it's really slim pickings in their potential matchups at middleweight. Top rank is pretty weak at 160 right now. Bob Arum, like Al Haymon at PBC, is in a position where he should really consider cross-promoting for his top middleweight, if making the best fights, the fights that matter, is the goal. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the middleweight division, and which matchups would you like to see take place in 2021? Out of those fights you'd like to see, which ones can actually be made, given the promotional lines in the sand drawn? Please, leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.